Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're unpacking a really fascinating piece of hidden healthcare history. When you think of underdogs fighting this decades-long battle for independence, your mind probably jumps straight to historical revolutions or political uprisings. But what if I told you there's an 80-year dramatic history of rebellion going on right inside your local hospital? Seriously, we're going to trace the journey of the physiotherapy profession. This is a group that literally fought tooth and nail to break free from the shadows of medical paternalism to become the highly accountable, autonomous experts that we rely on today.
Let me ask you a quick question. When you walk into a clinic with a bad back, or maybe you're recovering from knee surgery, who do you actually think is in charge of your rehab plan? For the longest time, the automatic assumption was that doctors dictate every single move. They write out this rigid recipe for recovery, and someone else just blindly follows it. But actually, scratch that. That assumption is rooted in an incredibly outdated power dynamic.
Okay, let's dive into this. The contrast between the past and the present is, honestly, pretty stark. Historically, early textbooks gave these highly prescriptive descriptions of exactly what physiotherapists should do for specific conditions. It was literally just a list of doctor's orders. But today? No way. That prescriptive approach is entirely obsolete. Today's physiotherapists are independent, highly analytical experts. They carry out their own full, accurate assessments, use really deep clinical reasoning, and offer individualized management options. They aren't just following recipes anymore. They're essentially the master chefs of your physical recovery.
Section 1. The Shadow of Medical Paternalism.
So let's step back in time a bit and look at the dark ages of this profession. This was a time when doctors held absolute, unquestioned control over the whole shebang. Our story starts way back in 1894. And get this, medical rubbers, that was the actual phrasing they used back then. The Chartered Society of Physiotherapy was originally founded in the UK under the name of the Society of Trained Masseuses, and it was specifically to regulate the practice of these medical rubbers. And their very first rule of professional conduct was incredibly strict. It stated that absolutely no massage was to be undertaken except under medical direction. So for years, doctors completely and totally governed the profession.
To really wrap your head around what these early practitioners were up against, just listen to this staggering quote from the mid-20th century medical establishment. Doctors at the time argued that, quote, professional and technical staff have no right to challenge his views, only he is equipped to decide how best to get the patients fit again. I mean, wow. Think about the sheer arrogance of that stance. This quote perfectly captures the immense, suffocating medical paternalism of the era. It really highlights the incredibly steep uphill battle this profession faced just to get a seat at the table.
Let's move to the timeline and see how this builds. Despite being held so firmly under the medical thumb, the profession was actually quietly expanding across the decades. They used the intense demands of the world wars, along with new advancements in technology, to expand their manual therapy skills into exercise, movement, and electrophysical modalities. It's kind of like a snowball effect. They earned a royal charter in 1920. Then, in 1948, their training moved directly into hospital-based schools right alongside the birth of the NHS. And finally, after a ton of intense lobbying against doctors who were desperately trying to quash their quest for self-regulation, they secured a state register with the CPSM in 1962. It was a massive, massive shift in power, even though doctors were definitely still out there loudly asserting total dominance.
Section 2. The Breakthrough for Independence.
Okay, so here is the climax of our story. In the 1970s, three massive dominoes fell that finally began to shatter over 80 years of medical paternalism. First up, the Tunbridge Report. This officially stated that while doctors prescribed treatment, therapists absolutely needed more scope in how they applied it. Next, the 1973 Macmillan Report pushed things even further. It recommended that therapists should actually be the ones deciding the nature and duration of the treatment. People were finally realizing that referring doctors simply didn't have the granular skills for these detailed physical techniques. And then, the big one, the 1977 Health Circular. This officially recognized that physiotherapists possessed specialized knowledge over and above what was reasonable to expect from a referring doctor. Bam! It officially secured their professional autonomy.
So the crucial point is how the source material actually defines this hard-won freedom. Autonomy is a dichotomy. On one hand, it is a privilege, right? It's the ability to act independently, but equally, it is a massive responsibility. It means having absolute accountability for the decisions you make. By 1977, physiotherapists weren't just free to make their own choices, they were officially on the hook for them. This required immense professional maturity and a massive commitment to career-long learning just to build and maintain the trust of the public.
Section 3. Expanding the scope of practice.
You see, winning autonomy wasn't the end of the journey. Actually, it was just the beginning. It completely opened the floodgates for the profession to grow at an incredible pace, which brings us to a really pivotal year, 1994. 2 years after gaining autonomy, the debate around education opened up, and by 94, the profession achieved all graduate entry. This was the moment. This is when they fully cemented their identity as highly educated professionals. They were no longer reliant on the patronage of the medical profession. They finally had their own unique underpinning knowledge base.
And we can see exactly where that high-level education led them across modern clinical roles today. By 1996, driven by this huge need to maximize healthcare productivity, physiotherapists started taking on what they called extended roles. We're talking about tasks that were previously the strict, exclusive domain of medicine. Suddenly, they're working right alongside doctors, triaging patients, and providing direct medical management. They expanded way beyond basic musculoskeletal work, proving their clinical effectiveness across super diverse areas, things like neurology, respiratory care, and women's health.
Section 4. The Modern Accountable Physiotherapist.
And this brilliantly illustrates what all this history, clinical governance, and expanding scope of practice actually means for you, the patient, when you walk into a clinic today. Essentially, the profession traded medical paternalism for rigorous self-regulation. By the late 90s and early 2000s, to make absolutely sure they were delivering safe, high-quality care, they implemented these massive regulatory frameworks. They finally gained legal protection of their title under the HCPC in 2002, which, by the way, is a battle they fought for literally 30 years. They embrace strict clinical governance, mandatory continuing professional development audits to constantly prove their competence, and a fresh 2007 interpretation of their Royal Charter to clearly define their scope of practice. They proved without a shadow of a doubt that true independence demands uncompromising standards.
As we wrap up this explainer, just consider this 100+ years of evolution for a second. The next time you are sitting in a physiotherapy clinic, take a brief moment to appreciate the invisible history floating around in that room. You aren't just seeing a medical rubber blindly following a doctor's recipe anymore. You are sitting across from a highly educated, fiercely accountable, autonomous expert who stands on the shoulders of over a century of professional rebellion. You truly are in good hands. But honestly, it kind of leaves you wondering, how many other healthcare roles that we totally take for granted today had to fight this exact same hidden war just for the right to heal you? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.